Well, when we started the program, I didn't have a clue what to expect. And then the fact that we had to meet each other on Zoom was a little strange. I thought, how am I going to pair up with somebody? But the truth of the matter was I met Noah, the scientist that I'm paired with, and I knew almost right away that this was the person I wanted to work with. And it was because I asked him a question. He leaned into the screen to look up the answer, and his eyes got all fired up like, oh, good, I can talk about my chemistry. And the idea that he was so excited about his work, because I'm excited about my art, I thought this is going to be a good pairing. But I still didn't know what the heck we were going to do. And it was about water, and I've been fascinated by water my entire artistic career. So I thought this would be good too. But then we started to meet week after week, and I found each week I learned more about what he was doing and more about how it related to what I'm doing. That was incredible, because you think about art and you think about science as two different spheres. In fact, one of the questions that we got from someone was, what's it like to work with someone with an analytical mind when you're a creative? And all the things fired off in my mind. I was like, that's insane. Because Noah's work is terribly creative, and my work needs to be analytical. We have both. We use both all the time. So now I've gotten to know his research, which is about something I knew nothing about before. It's metabolites. Tiny, 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 like molecular parts, essentially parts. And he's learning about the life cycle of these things in the water specifically. And I had just finished rereading Cosmos, Carl Sagan's Cosmos, where he talks about the beginning of life. And he talks about the carbon in our teeth, the iron in our blood, all of these things coming from collapsing stars. These are the elemental life things that Noah is studying. So I was very excited about that research. And then trying to figure out how to put it into art was a different thing, because I did not want to just do a picture of water and just sort of represent, oh, here's, this is water, he's doing water. And I didn't want to do something that was just a representation of the data points that he had collected. It just didn't seem like it was adding anything. So I actually spent about a month playing with the data, walking along the beach, thinking about the water itself. And it occurred to me that water being this colorless thing that we don't really understand what it is. We think we do, but we don't. We think we see the water, but we don't. It's colorless. What we see is whatever tints it, whatever reflects back, or whatever we see through it. And at that moment, I began to think about the research that he was doing on these metabolites. He's got 4 places where he's doing sampling. And the first one is what is represented in this picture, is the coastal one. And coastal surface water, he says, is a hot mess. He said all of these colonies of different chemical things in the water that come from man-made pollution, that come from trees, that come from all kinds of things, change the chemical balance and have all of these colonies that are like mad. So I started to do the colonies in this picture here, upside down. This was the bottom, and then I began to go out to sea thinking I'd have more and more colonies as I went further out. And the more I looked at it, the more I realized that it didn't work that way. I turned it sideways, I turned it upside down, and I began to see the colonies making sense. And then I wanted to talk about what we think of when we see water. So this is what Noah sees in the water, but what do we see is the reflection of the water. So we've got the window into this and the mirrors of the sky. So I made up these sort of cloud-like forms that are sort of on the threshold between abstraction and realism. People look at it, they sometimes see actual water, they think it looks wet, I've heard that, which is nice. These are just cloud-like forms that I made up that our mind can associate with water. And that was what I really was hoping for. This is not quite finished, but almost. And it was exciting to get to the point where I could show it to Noah in a picture. I showed him all the stages and have him say, yes, that is exactly what this data is finding. The challenge was going to the next data collection area, which is also surface water, but it's off Bermuda in the Sargasso Sea. And that doesn't have any of this. In fact, he described it as a desert. And I was really surprised because my knowledge of science didn't tell me that that would be a desert. I figured that there would be photosynthesis and all kinds of activity, but apparently the metabolites that he's studying in that area get pretty much burned out if they have too much light on them. They do better a little deeper. So that's why I'm starting this one that's over here, which is a little more desert-like. There are 4 panels actually, because there are 4 collection zones of the data that he's using. And the first one, as I said, is coastal surface. This is ocean surface. And then he goes a little deeper, and then quite a bit deeper. And he's analyzing what's in there. And the information that he's gathering, it's all about dissolved organic compounds, and knowing the life cycle of these metabolites helps us understand so many things about why the water is currently, what it is currently, and what it can be in the future. It's essentially learning the life cycle of chemistry, of things that we couldn't even comprehend a few decades ago. It's so exciting. Awful lot about the idea that I'm showing the collection areas, and I am showing my understanding of the data that he's collecting. But I wanted to show something actually about the scientific method and the human hand, the human mind, because what is happening is that he's finding this and he's organizing the thought. And so I've just ordered these little panels, they're aluminum, to go in between these other panels, and I'm going to use data that he sent me and images from his computer in order to do some sort of a rectilinear, orderly, and organized thing, which contrasts so much with the data that he's actually collecting, with the material that he's collecting. And he's been kind enough to continually send me information. So these are images from his computer, which I think make fabulous patterns, and even his notes. So I'm going to integrate some of the notes, as in the hand of the scientist, on the silver. So there's another part of this project that I haven't mentioned yet, and that is that Noah is also a musician. And we've talked about it quite a bit, and he is pulling the data points and converting them into sound, and then he's writing a score which he's playing on the saxophone and going to record, and the sound is going to relate to the data in each of the 4 pictures, so that a visitor can hopefully press a button and hear the sound of the data points, see the imagery, and I would also write some text to go with it. So there'd be wall copy that would explain what they were reading, what they were seeing. And I'm very excited about that component. So it's got multiple angles, multiple ways of reaching people. We've also talked about the possibility of preparing a small program for school children, and the idea that he could talk about his conversion of the data to sound, and I could talk about the conversion of data to imagery, and how the collaboration itself worked, and how art and science are so deeply integrated. And as each of us thinks about the other's field, I find that my art is better because I've had to express it, and I get the feeling that in having to explain it to me and having to talk about it on a more philosophical level, that it's actually helping his research as well. So we think that will be very useful.